For me, it's an honor to welcome you to the session, Economies of AI. Where is the value? And I'm really personally very happy that we could arrange this session, because I think many of us are looking for clarifications all the time. AI is surrounded by extraordinary promises, productivity, competitiveness, innovation, even a new method of invention. But at the same time, public trust is fragile. Many people experience AI less as an empowerment, but then as a job pressure, unreliable automation, environmental burden, and forced dependencies. I have put a list of studies just to provide evidence if somebody asks about these studies, and the list is growing every day. So there is a real need to understand this paradox. How can something be so highly valued by markets and at the same time be so contested, distrusted, and simply unwanted by many publics? This is why our question today matters, Where is the value? What is actually produced? Where is it captured? And who pays the costs, and what can we actually do about it? And you see the economy is in plural. And maybe we should also put the AI in plural, we will see. So it is a tremendous pleasure for me to welcome Cecilia Rikap, who is Associate Professor in Economics and Head of Research at the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose at the University College in London. You hold a PhD in economics from the Universidad de Buenos Aires, and you are a tenure researcher at CONICET, Argentina's National Research Council, and you have a lot of other jobs and duties and roles that I cannot list here because time is short. But also, and that I'm particularly proud of, you have been, or you are still, the Paul Lazarsfeld Visiting Professor at the University of Vienna. So your work examines the political economy of science, technology, and innovation in a broader sense, with a particular focus on intellectual monopolies, digital dependency, and the concentration of knowledge and infrastructural power. And you have a book forthcoming, and we'll talk about a lot of content that will be readable in the book that is coming out very soon.
Yeah, like in a month.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. The Rulers, and yeah, let us start already here and see what the rulers do.
Absolutely. Well, hi, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And I will go straight to how the rulers operate. Okay, can you see this? My question would be, where shall I point to get the next slide? No? Maybe there? Okay, now we can start. So thanks a lot for having me here. I'm going to just give a very brief 10 minutes presentation, hopefully less, because our idea is to have a discussion, also to have a discussion with all of you. I'm sure you will have a lot of questions, a lot of things to say about this topic, and specifically about corporate power and its interplay with political power. And here you have only one side of this interplay, because of course we could also be speaking about China, Chinese big tech, and its tight relationship, even if also sometimes conflicting relationship with the Chinese government. And in all this story, we should also ask ourselves, where is Europe? Where is the rest of the world? What about all the other organizations that are also contributing to the production of frontier science and technology? Why is it that, as I will argue today, the rulers of today's capitalism are ultimately cloud giants, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, in a tight alliance with the United States government? So let me go straight to some illustrations of the world we live in. This is even old. Of course, this is 1 year old, more or less, so there is no SpaceX here, and it's roller coaster of stock value. But in any case, most of the companies that we see on that map are still more or less pretty much in the same place. So when we try to think about what makes a big company big, and this is one way of seeing it, they are big in market capitalization, I would split these large companies in two groups, broadly speaking. A small group are the companies that get their advantage from the extraction of nature. And you have Saudi Aramco, for instance, there. And with the invasion of Iran, it became also clear how oil, fossil fuels still play a very important role in our society, although more than ever, we should be focusing on an ecological transformation. But the other part of this big group of this small group of big companies are what I would describe as intellectual monopolies. And these companies are not only tech companies, this is one thing. So tech companies are a paradigmatic, perhaps the most extreme example of an intellectual monopoly, but they're not the only intellectual monopolies. Big pharma are another typical example of intellectual monopoly. And I would argue that all the big companies over there that don't get their advantage from the extraction of nature, get their advantage from the systematic extraction of society's knowledge in its multiple forms turned into their intangible assets. So these are not typical innovators in the historical way of seeing this, for instance, from the economics standpoint. These are not companies that get one innovation and then the rest of the market catches up, and then we have another innovation that in some cases may come from the same company or another one, and then the market catches up, and so on and so forth. Some companies are left behind. This cyclical way of thinking about innovation doesn't hold water in today's capitalism. And basically, we have a dynamic that for the older people in the room can be described as coyote and roadrunner, where there is always the roadrunner moving ahead and the coyote trying to chase it, but we know it will never do it. And in this story, big tech companies are particularly relevant because the type of intangible assets that they are capturing are structural for our society. Of course, one can argue that medicine is also critical for our society, but it affects overall one sector of our economy that then has ramifications everywhere, whereas tech, from the very beginning, is everywhere. It doesn't matter what you have in your mind right now, everything is impacted by tech. And digital technologies are control technologies, which means that they are the technologies that enable us to organize our everyday life, but also to organize and manage organizations, from companies to governments. And the more time passes by and the more of these organizations adopt artificial intelligence that is sold as a black box by and through these big companies' cloud marketplaces, and I'm speaking here specifically not of all the big tech, but of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, the less organizations will have a capacity to independently organize and decide how they organize, manage, and plan their institutions and organizations. These companies, typically, one would say, it's not new that we have big companies. And one can do this type of comparisons where we compare the market capitalization of a company like NVIDIA with that of, for instance, in this case, the GDP of the UK. And for some, this would be mind-blowing. But for others, it will be, yeah, capitalism, go back in history. You can even go back to the prehistory of capitalism with the East Indian companies. Having big companies with political power is not new. But what is new, what I would argue that is new and is something that has been cooked over the last decades, is the capacity of these leading corporations to control beyond ownership now not only global value chains, not only other organizations in a platform, not only the franchisees, if we are speaking, for instance, of a company like McDonald's that has thousands of franchisees, tens actually of thousands of franchisees around the world, but also their capacity to control beyond ownership the production of new knowledge. And this is where I will focus on in a minute, but before, just to give you a sense of how I would think of capitalism in this context, in a context in which leading corporations have this capacity to control beyond ownership. So they have a capacity to decide how we produce in organizations that are not formally their own. And not only how we produce new value, how we produce new things that are then sold in a market or services, but also how we produce knowledge. And therefore, how we produce and reproduce our existence. But before we get into that, let me summarize these main arguments with the following bullet points. Capitalism, global capitalism, doesn't operate just as in exchanges between national economies, a sort of unified world with multiple national economies that interact with each other. When us as economists think of macroeconomics, we actually arrive at a very misleading conclusion of capitalism, because our unit of analysis is the country. And inside the country, think of the US. When I was saying that US cloud giants and the US government are at the core of capitalism, are the ruling coalition of global capitalism, I didn't say the US. Because inside the US, we also have all the people living around the data centers that try to open their pipes and drink water and cannot because the water is brown. The US is also a country with a declining life expectancy rate, and we can continue naming. So clearly, also inside the US, there are a lot of citizens, a lot of people that are on the side of the losers. But still, global capitalism operates as a network, and this network is hierarchical. Different organizations relate to each other, but when they do so, those relationships are not relations of equals. We are used to think of the global market economy as a sort of as the maximum scale of Adam Smith's invisible hand. Nobody deciding how things are exchanged, how things are produced. Every individual unit of production will be doing its own thing, and then the market will solve it and tell us what can be sold, what isn't sold, and so on. This is not the reality of today's capitalism. Today's capitalism is organized under authoritarian planning. These leading corporations, the US government, when they control beyond ownership, they decide, they plan, they have long-term goals, and they decide who will be doing what inside the global economy, and who will know what also. And of course, who will profit afterwards. But for this to work, it's not that we just live in a world with a few actors that control everything and all the rest are equally powerless. There are many complicit actors in the peripheries of global capitalism. And of course, we can think of far-right governments in countries like mine, Argentina, that operate and govern for the US government and for the big tech companies and other big companies from the US and sometimes also big companies from Europe. But these complicit actors are not only political actors, also companies, big companies, are complicit actors of this strategy. And I will come back to that later on. But before I do so, I want to go to what I mentioned before, this capacity to control beyond ownership the production of knowledge. And usually here, I would show you a lot of empirics, and you can check that in my publications. I want to give you a very simple version of this. With my very limited capacities to design, this was not designed by AI, it was designed by an economist. So, corporate innovation systems is the term that I use and others use to refer to how leading corporations that act as intellectual monopolies control the co-production of new knowledge among many, and you have it there, many organizations, individuals co-produce new knowledge in all its forms. It can also be the crafting of narratives that then, such as brand building for a pharma company or for the Google brand. But then, this is appropriated by a few. And sometimes these few manage to make money out of the appropriation of this collectively created knowledge. So basically here, what we get is a process that is not only what I would describe as intangibles extractivism, because this knowledge is produced by many, but then extracted, appropriated, and monetized by a few, but also of epistemic totalitarianism, because the companies that are the ones that monetize the co-created research are also the ones that decide what that research will be about. The fact that AI is becoming a method of invention, for instance, is something that big tech companies have been pushing for. Because of course, if they control the method that we use to even ask ourselves questions, us as scholars, as researchers, but also as individuals, if they control the methods that we use to think, they control how and what we think. So it is in this context that, for me, the cloud is particularly relevant. And you may say, but this was about AI. Why are you switching to the cloud? And it's because AI actually is born, raised, and used to control people in the workplace as an automatic weapon, as for addictive algorithms in social media. All this happens through the cloud. And it happens through the cloud not only because the cloud is infrastructure as a service. Indeed, the cloud offers NVIDIA and other semiconductors, sometimes also designed by the cloud giants themselves, as a service. It offers all of us and everyone, every type of organization, the chance to store our data. But it's much, much more than that. I usually describe it as a first proxy as a supermarket. It's a supermarket of digital technologies. Whatever digital technology you want, you can rent it as a service on the cloud. But it's actually more than that, because all these digital technologies are not only exchanged on the cloud, they are also developed, produced inside the cloud, and then deployed, consumed inside the cloud. It may have happened to you if you had the opportunity to fly somewhere or to be in a place without internet connectivity. If your computer is always connected to the cloud, probably you were not able to open all your files. This is one of the moments in which we realize that what we think is always happening in our device actually is not happening there. But this is not only a story about individuals and how we all get dependent on these infrastructures that are based on the concentration of a lot of knowledge. It's not just infrastructure in the old sense of the term, where we build a highway or a bridge, and then that's it. Of course, they can control it, but the capacity to control knowledge and to centralize knowledge and make that knowledge the infrastructure of our society has ramifications and impacts that go way beyond the effect that it has a privatized bridge connecting two towns, again. So we can establish the similarities, the analogies, but we cannot just think of this type of enclosure as the same as all of the others that we can think of, the examples that I've given so far, and so on. And as I was saying, this is a supermarket. So in every supermarket, we not only have the products offered directly by the owner of the supermarket. So Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have platforms there where developers, smaller companies can offer their services as cloud services. And these services, of course, every time we consume them, we will be paying for them as organizations, as individuals. But part of what we pay will go to the cloud giant in a similar way of what we see for Amazon.com, but with the difference that, again, this is not just a marketplace, but a place where all the technologies, even the AI models, are produced. And when the AI models are not produced there, as in the case of DeepSeek or Meta, they inevitably then go to the cloud and offer in these companies' clouds the possibility to, again, use as a service their AI models, because they cannot afford to be outside of this virtual space or market. And in this story, precisely speaking about AI, I would define AI as a sort of Trojan horse, a marketing strategy, because AI is full of promises. And believe me, I mean, some things, yeah, well, probably AI will deliver some good, but will not solve all the healthcare issues in our society, will not solve the ecological crisis, cannot solve not even something small by itself, because technology never by itself brings solutions. What we need, for instance, clearly for achieving these critical solutions, above all, is to have political will, political decisions to change things. And then technology can be developed in certain ways that contribute to delivering. Why do I say that AI is a Trojan horse? Well, clearly here, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, says it, on a LinkedIn post. And he speaks of AI as commodities. And if you think about it, there are many, even if not thousands, there are many AI startups developing models. Many AI companies no longer considered as startups developing models. The cloud giants develop their own AI models. The production of AI is ultimately not where we see the bottleneck. The bottleneck is the cloud. Because no matter where or how you produce your AI model, even SpaceX AI models are also offered on Microsoft and other clouds. So why do I say that AI is a Trojan horse? Because every organization these days wants to adopt AI for something. They don't know exactly sometimes for what, but this FOMO is driving not only companies, but also governments. But what they do is they migrate to the cloud as a way to start using AI as a service. And when they do so, they start purchasing a lot of black boxes They don't know how they were trained, with what data, how they operate, how they make the decisions. And this not only happens with the AI models, but with most of the services that are offered on the cloud. And this generates both corporate and public sector dependencies. Companies like Netflix cannot operate outside of Amazon Web Services, for instance. So Netflix is rival of Amazon, and still it operates its very complex and successful, one could say, platform through the cloud. So I'm not saying that for a company like Netflix, this is that she has been, if you want, she's sacrificing itself by being on the cloud. It's a strategic choice of leading corporations from all the different industries, pharma industry, automobile industry, you name it, to strategically subordinate and depend on the services offered on the cloud in order to then be able to exercise their own control beyond ownership in their global value chains if they have them, incorporate innovation systems, again, in other platforms, as is the case of Netflix. So it's a strategic subordination. They put themselves in a sort of semi-core space in order to extract more value from those that are at the periphery. And therefore, they become complicit actors of this structure as well. And the same can be said of governments when they, knowing the effects or not, decide that they are migrating the state operations to the cloud. So I leave you here. There are many, many questions to continue discussing, but this would be my, if you want, my teaser of what this book is about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. A lot of topics popped up. I think what resonated deeply with also my understanding as a non-economist is this idea of control beyond ownership that you, I think, illustrated very well. But I want to come back to the topic of the value, actually, because you were talking a lot now about the dependencies, but on the other hand, all these companies, they seem to be mastering dependencies also on another level. Because when we look at the AI boom and all the extraordinary valuations and the IPOs and visits to the Pope and the huge investment and productivity promises, and also the new, as we would say in German, billionaire, but trillionaires in English, right? But we still don't know what value is really there. Okay, now we understand it's the cloud, but somehow they are mastering their dependencies in a circular way themselves. So it looks like a bubble, or it looks like a mafia strategy to me, you know, as not being an economist. What is it? What are they doing? They're building it, they are pushing each other's values up. So how is that?
So basically, the financial market is also betting on AI, and is, especially for the concentrated forms of financial capital, is probably their only bet these days. And what we actually have is the effect of having intellectual monopolies in a society is clearly more inequality. Because you have the same actors concentrating more income and wealth. And if you think of these companies, the big tech, in particular the cloud giants, all the money they make year after year, they have a lot of liquidity. And not only a lot of liquidity internally the company, but also because of a historical process of the value of their stocks going up, the asset managers that manage pension funds and whole set of other financial institutions, funds on their behalf, they have been accumulating also a lot of wealth. So companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, they have been harvesting part of the, if you want, the income associated with the capture of value from our societies that is based on the appropriation of data, knowledge, the crafting of narratives, and so on. So we need to go like layer after layer. And at the bottom, we see a process in which we are all collectively creating data, collectively creating knowledge. So a lot of my research has delved into showing how public research organizations, universities, startup companies, they all participate in the thousands in the peripheries around large tech companies, in particular cloud giants. And I've done this with multiple indicators, looking at venture capital money, looking at co-authorships of scientific papers. So basically, we see effectively that there is a lot of co-creation. Then we can discuss whether the creation of intangibles can then be discussed, like from a more like economic theory perspective, if it can be described as value or not. But it's certainly a use value. It's certainly relevant and necessary for our society. So we are collectively creating all these cultural common that then is stripped from us, is completely captured by these companies through the mechanisms that I was explaining and through semi-complicit or complicit actors that regulate on their favor, that don't regulate on their favor, that operate in broader ecosystems on their behalf, and so on. So part of what the financial market reflects, is this process. But the other part is that with all this accumulation of wealth, for companies that some people will say, well, but now cloud giants are investing in capital expenditure, in tangible capital, because they concentrate the data centers. To that, I will reply that actually they've been investing in data centers for at least the last decade. It's just that most of the people were not paying attention at that variable from their financial accounts. However, I would say that because there is also this combination of a financial bet on AI and a lot of liquidity in a small number of hands, we perceive the effect, the potentiality of a bubble. Adding to this story, the fact that a lot of the things that AI will be producing are completely uncertain, to say the least. So yeah, there is this risk. But what I think is the most important there is, will the bubble explode? And I think that way before that, Donald Trump will save the companies. And it's different to try to think of the role of a company like Anthropic or OpenAI compared to a cloud giant. Why? Because a cloud giant has another business. Although it's investing a lot in AI, it is already making money. It has multiple business models, and these companies are already making money. Whereas those that are in the semi-periphery of actors that depend on the cloud giants' investment, that depend on the cloud giants' knowledge concentrated inside the cloud, like OpenAI, Anthropic, you name it, these companies are the weakest links within those that seem to be harvesting the profits associated, or the potential profits associated with AI. So it's a very unstable context, yes. But I don't see a massive crash, because I do see, and there are many signs of this US government directly purchasing equity, for instance, 10% equity in Intel, that will prevent that from happening. At the same time, that comes at the cost of the US government influencing even more how and what type of AI is produced. So it's a combination of what the companies want and the US government wants.
And whether it can be shared with the rest of the world or not, as we have seen in the Anthropic case. Before I open up to you, to the audience, to ask questions, one last hint or maybe question. With all these dependencies that you have just been illustrating, we in Europe, somehow we try to, grapple with that. And there was just released a set of measures, the so-called sovereignty package. It's actually quite interesting to hear what you were just talking about, and then put a term like sovereignty against it. It's still questionable whether this works. But we've put in place a sovereignty package, a cloud and AI legislation or package, CHIPS Acts, open source strategy, AI and energy, the whole strategy for an AI continent, all these things. I'm not through them, but I've asked you before whether you have had a look at them. How are we prepared to deal with this situation, with this sovereignty package?
So basically, the context, I would say, that the European Union is facing can be described as a trilemma. There are three things that the European Union wants to get with this package, but not only, more generally, in its digital policies and more with every policy. One is economic growth, competitiveness. The second one is to address the ecological crisis. This tech sovereignty package actually has a small document that is a roadmap for putting AI into energy systems across the energy value chain, and also for identifying ways to operate data centers that are a bit more sustainable. Whether that can be done, I will go back to that later on. But this is the second part of the story. The third part is sovereignty. So the EU wants competitiveness, solving the ecological crisis, and sovereignty. And I think that the three cannot be achieved together. All the tech package is about competitiveness. It daydreams about a world in which we produce data centers. Europe multiplies by 3 its number of data centers from here to 2030, and the energy grid copes with it fantastically. I really don't know who did the calculations there, but already seeing the effects of the massive build-outs of data centers in places like Ireland show us, or Spain these days, show us that it is not the way forward. But still Europe feels that it's lagging so much behind and associates AI with the data centers and thinks that if the data centers are built in Europe, then there will be two things happening. One, Europe will be closer to at least shorten the gap with the US, and Europe will be capable of governing, of regulating at least a little bit better these digital technologies. I would say that the two goals will not be fulfilled, will not be delivered. First of all, when a company like Microsoft, Amazon, Google builds a data center in your territory, on top of not creating jobs, not creating any positive structural transformation in the economy, they do systematically capture natural resources. So here what we see is a sort of co-evolution of nature extractivism with intangibles extractivism that I describe as twin extractivism. Because you have the data centers, but basically the only thing that happens is more extraction of energy and water from your territory, without that data center representing that you have more chances of developing anything. Because actually, if you have a vibrant tech community, they can train whatever they want in data centers around the world. It's not that they need to be sitting next to the data center to be able to use the processors. But at the same time, there is no chance to ultimately regulate the data center or govern the data that is inside their territories, because data centers operate like foreign military bases in our territories, where everything that happens inside the data center is decided by the companies, including whether they will fulfill their obligation to give Donald Trump or whoever is in office in the US government the data that they request when they do so. So clearly, the data centers will be the opposite to contributing to solving the ecological crisis. And even if the data centers could be built on renewables, shouldn't we be prioritizing the use of that renewable energy for other purposes before continuing building more data centers that are the material basis of the extraction of data, of the extraction of knowledge from our societies? I'm not against building data centers in abstract terms. The question here is, who is building them, where they are built, whose data will be stored, for what purposes, what are we going to do with the data? And if all this is left in the hands of the companies, and then in your macroeconomics you show that you had more investment in tech and you feel, I don't know, rewarded.
Indicators are ticked.
It's ticking the box, but it's not making life of the majorities better. And it's not sovereign either.
Yeah.
And this is the trick, this is the complexity. Because the digital economy also challenges our ways of thinking about sovereignty. Sovereignty is no longer just about territory. I mean, one could, and I use the foreign military base as an example to also connect it with history, because foreign military bases in different territories have existed for many, many years now. But anyway, I think that today, and more than ever, when we look at the co-production of technology, it's clear that the co-production is global. What is centralized is the profiting and the decision-making of what technology we get.
Yeah, so we have a lot of experts here in the room, actually, and I see already a lot of hands. Actually, you were the first one. There will be a microphone coming. I've looked here first, so I've seen some hands here, but I've also, yeah, I'll see how many we can take. I just want to say that because we also have people here at the conference who are now involved in building infrastructure, in investing into European infrastructure, supercomputing, but also AI factories, you know, all these ideas. So it will be yeah, interesting how you react. So please, you were the first one. Then
If we ask what the value of an AI is, we have the problem that that values per se are variate between different people. Yes, we have a problem with capitalism, but that is a result from development from the Cold War, Austrian school, neoclassic, etc., a culmination of many factors. But there are also people who value AI because they want a smart home or other things. What they might consider very good for themselves, not because some company told them, but because, for example, AI could be more helpful in hospitals or other institutions. So we have to differ between the value what the individuum considered as value of the AI, and that what is propagandated by companies via advertisements or via other factor that the AI, that the value of the AI should be.
It's very long,
yeah.
each question.
So I think we need to collect because or do you want to react
No,
briefly?
no, no. We can collect, but I would suggest that the questions are
Yeah,
like
short,
shorter.
because we're running out of time. Yeah, so we can collect. So next one was Joanna. Then there is a hand that will be the next one. Yeah, but first row, please. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't forget you.
Great.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, no problem. I actually have a short question, but it's actually three short questions that are interrelated. So very quickly, I loved what you talked about with this cultural extractive monopolies. I've been looking for this idea. Thank you. And I wondered if you could briefly say anything about how like insurance companies, the investors like BlackRock that you mentioned, and also consultancies fit into your framework. Secondly, just totally quick, you had this list of 50 largest economies. I understand economies to define by currency, so I was wondering where the Eurozone was on your graph. And then finally, there's been discussion here about investing, and of course the Trump investing, you mentioned it up. Should something like the EU, or maybe even a wider coalition of the abiders of the rule of law, invest as the US is investing, and then therefore being a counterpower as an investor? And why not just tax instead? If we could come up with, how is investing and taxing different? I'm showing my ignorance in economics.
Do you want to now combine the two? Yeah.
So first about value, I think I will emphasize something that I mentioned before. We need to differentiate between the economic value and how our society decides what's economically valuable from use value, from the possibility of something to fulfill a need. I will give one example. For some people in the world, it would be very useful to have automatic weapons to conduct a genocide, like the one that Israel conducted in Gaza. And part of that was done with the help of these companies, because these companies in projects like Project Nimbus, there is another project in which Microsoft provided the infrastructure for the data from all the phones from every single Palestinian that was retrieved by the Israeli government. So these companies are complicit to that, and of course for the Israeli government, they are very useful. So certainly, they can provide a lot of use value and also economic value to some. The question about value and the way we discuss about framing it, the importance, what we wanted to bring to the table is not so much about the uses of AI, because I think that a democratic society would very easily identify that certain uses of AI should be forbidden. This is not the critical discussion, although unfortunately it seems that it will continue being a discussion given the state of the world. But the critical discussion is to go to the deeper layers and debunk the myth that says that we need to cope with these companies because they are the innovators. They are not. what all my research is about is to show that we are all collectively creating not only the raw data, but also all the knowledge that then these companies monetize. So this, I think, there is where we need to see the difference and where we need to value more what we are capable of doing. In the maps that where I describe how all these value chains are organized, there are thousands of European organizations. So this idea that Europe cannot do it, and I go to the final question about what type of coalition, this idea that Europe cannot do it by itself because it doesn't have the talent, it doesn't have the money, and so on and so forth. I think to these problems, we need to think with political imagination about solutions, identifying and recognizing that we do have talent that today is put at the service of these predatory ecosystems, and that we can think of a development of technology that doesn't require to invest everything on an LLM that then undermines people's capacity to think. Imagine, again, another quote-unquote beautiful example, use of generative AI at schools, instead of kids learning to think by themselves. Because all of us here in this room, we have a capacity to distinguish when the AI gives a good result from a bad result. But if you live all your life with the AI and you never think by yourself, you never create the questions, you never take you never experience the frustration of not arriving at a solution and learning from that failure as well, your capacity to face society's problems is completely undermined. Insurance companies, I would say one word about I want to say one word actually not about insurance companies, about the McKinseys of the world. They are playing one of the most obvious examples of complicit actors in this story. They are marketing agencies pushing every single government and big companies in particular inside the cloud, telling them that this is the way forward, that using these services will give them not only the chances to govern and solve citizens' problems, but also shaping and changing what the state is about, transforming the state into a provider of services instead of our key critical institution for governance and decision-making. So definitely undermining our democracies. And usually in economics, we look GDP at the country level. So in general, you never see the EU all combined. The EU has these complexities anyway, but still it would be small compared to...
We are unfortunately running out of time. We have one more question and I have to cut it, but Cecilia will be here and maybe you can catch the break. So please, very short, please.
Yes, you were talking about complicit actors, but in fact, we all as individuals are complicit actors. The system have trained us how to serve them and provide data and so on. And not even the Pope in his encyclical was brave enough to suggest the only radical consequence just to not to be complicit and just not to join this system because the church wanted to be not anti-modern.
Well, one way of seeing it effectively, it's that one. But I would challenge that view and say that most of the actors in our society have no other choice but to be part of these predatory ecosystems. Whereas a company like SAP, like Siemens, Volkswagen, you name it, they could have other choices. But they choose to become dependent on these technologies because it's through these technologies that they become more expert in capturing value from those that are further down. And this is why I think that these hierarchical networks, this idea of a core, a semi-core, periphery, and a super periphery helps us see the different degrees of bargaining power that we have as actors. And also reinforce the need to, one, work together to develop alternatives, two, make states accountable. They may have a lot of problems, we may criticize a lot of things, but they are ultimately the only democratic institution that has some financial leeway to contribute to building a truly democratic alternative.
So we will see how this will go, especially in Europe, with this new package being in place. We'll have a session tomorrow on digital sovereignty. We'll have a session just following up on geopolitics for the questions that you have raised as well. So we need to close now, unfortunately, because we're running out of time. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for being here. And I think as a last word, I think we now understand it's definitely not just a tech problem. It's a societal problem that we have to solve, and it's a lot of things to discuss. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.